Every fighter hopes to make a great first impression in the UFC, but some debuts have been extremely disappointing. The first fight of a UFC fighter's career is one of the most significant. While it is possible to lose your first octagon appearance and still be great, it is vital to demonstrate certain skills and abilities that prove that you have earned your position in the promotion. However, over the years, fans have been treated to some horrible fighting debuts. So, in today's video, we'll be looking at the top 10 most disastrous debuts in MMA history. Before that, please guys, do well to like and subscribe to this channel. With that being said, let's get started. Number 10. Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt began his combat sports career as a kickboxer in his early 20s. When the UFC purchased Pride in 2007, most of the Japanese promotion's best performers, from Wanderlei Silva to Mauricio Shogun Rua, made their way to the octagon. Mark Hunt, on the other hand, was strangely absent. After Pride was shut down, he turned down the UFC's offer to buy out his contract, so the UFC eventually signed him in late 2010, pitting him against fellow newcomer Sean McCorkle in his first bout. On paper, it appeared to be a simple match for Hunt. The Super Samoan, on the other hand, looked terrible in the fight. McCorkle brought the former K1 champion down just over a minute and promptly submitted him with a straight armbar. Nevertheless, Hunt's debut could not have been more disastrous, and he appeared to be on his way out of the promotion. Fortunately for his fans, this did not occur. Hunt shocked everyone by winning his next 4 fights in the octagon, and while he never won gold there, it's reasonable to say he was a great success, even if his time with the organization ended on a sour note. Number 9. Max Holloway. Max Holloway has established himself as probably the finest featherweight of all time in UFC history. Holloway was the UFC's youngest fighter when he made his promotional debut on February 4, 2012, as an injury replacement for Ricardo Lamas at UFC 143 against Dustin Poirier. However, his abilities from the last decade were not on display in his first bout against Dustin Poirier. Holloway appeared to have no answer for Poirier's smart footwork. Dustin dragged Max down and dominated him on the mat, eventually winning with a triangle armbar. Number 8. Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson has had one of the oddest careers in UFC history. His professional and promotional debut came on February 6, 2016, when he was scheduled as a short-notice fight at UFC Fight Night 82. After a 3-6 amateur career, Jackson made his pro debut where he challenged fellow prospect Mickey Gall. He lost the fight just 45 seconds into the first round. Mickey Gall knocked Jackson down and immediately submitted him with a rear naked choke. Number 7. Joe Sun. Joe Sun, later known as Random Task in Austin Powers, was an MMA fighter in the early 1990s, as well as a convicted felon. His UFC debut came against Keith Hackney at UFC 4 in one of the most difficult battles to watch. As the battle quickly went to the ground, Hackney had the stand-up advantage. Hackney then opted to unleash a barrage of groin strikes, which were permitted at the time, forcing Sun into a blood-choked victory. Number 6. Sean Gannon. Sean the Cannon Gannon is a Boston, Massachusetts police officer and former MMA fighter. He rose to prominence on the internet after a widely circulated video of Gannon defeating Kimbo Slice in an unofficial bare-knuckle street fight. The UFC decided to try something new in 2005. They didn't want to bring in Kimbo Slice, but they did want to bring in Sean Gannon, the only man to ever defeat him in a street fight. Because the heavyweight had a 2-0 professional record, he was given a match at UFC 55. Brandon Lee Hinkle, his opponent, took the fight to the mat and brutalized him. This one was hard to watch as Gannon was battered on the ground for 4 minutes, which ended in a first-round TKO loss. Number 5. Ramyu Theory Sokuju. Despite having only a little experience at the time, few fighters were signed to the UFC with as much fanfare as Ramyu Theory Sokuju. The African assassin had stormed into the Pride scene in early 2007, knocking out both Antonio Rogerio Nogueira and Ricardo Arona, and he appeared to be the sport's hottest fighter. When the UFC signed him to meet the unbeaten Lyoto Machida in the year's last event, literally every MMA fan on the planet was thrilled. How could they not be after what he'd done to Nogueira and Arona, 2 top 10 ranked fighters? In retrospect, there were obvious red signs. Sokuju was only 4-1 at the time, and no one knew how he would handle adversity. Even his ground game was a major mystery. Nonetheless, it seems that the majority of fans expected him to dispatch the Dragon in a couple of seconds. It was difficult not to be disappointed when that did not occur. Worse, the African assassin didn't even lay a glove on Machida before submitting to an arm triangle choke in the second round. Other Pride alumni made equally poor debuts in the octagon, but few carried the same hype as Sokuju, who simply didn't come close to living up to the reputation he brought with him. Over a decade on, his debut remains one of the most disappointing in history. Number 4. Rolls Gracie Jr. Royce Gracie, who introduced the world to the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, notoriously dominated the UFC's early events. Despite many members of his extended family participating in various MMA promotions across the world, once Royce had drawn with Kem Shamrock at UFC 5, it felt like we'd seen the last of the Gracies in the octagon. That changed in early 2010 when the promotion announced the signing of Rolls Gracie Jr. Hardcore supporters were excited, especially since Rolls was hailed as a next-generation Gracie with 3 MMA victories under his belt. Rolls Gracie Jr., Royce Gracie's son, was handed a UFC shot after 3 professional fights. Gracie Jr. was supposed to make his UFC debut against Mustafa Al-Turk on February 6, 2010 in Las Vegas, Nevada, but due to visa issues, the Jiu-Jitsu ace fighter faced veteran Joey Beltran in his debut octagon appearance at UFC 109. He was quick to prove that he did not belong in the UFC. After having his takedowns overturned in the first round, he appeared to be dying of exhaustion by the second. He was eventually TKO'd in the second round and eventually released. Number 3. James Toney. Another UFC experiment occurred in 2010 when the organization decided to give former boxing champion James Toney a go. In a cross-sport super fight, James Toney, popularly called Lights Out, was shortly given former UFC champion Randy Couture. Toney quickly demonstrated that his boxing talents did not translate to the ring. He was taken down seconds into the match and beaten on the ground, displaying no jiu-jitsu knowledge on his way to a submission loss. Couture secured a takedown on Toney early in the opening round before submitting him with an arm triangle choke. Toney's contract with the UFC was later terminated. The fight gained prominence, but it was criticized as a freak show fight by UFC President Dana White himself. Number 2. CM Punk. The UFC signed CM Punk in a somewhat controversial move in 2014. The organization opted to give the former WWE champion as much time as he needed to train and avoid rushing his progress while he was training out of Roufusport. Punk was most likely brought in because of his box office attraction at the time, so it's safe to assume that no serious UFC fans expected former WWE champion CM Punk to win gold inside the octagon or even crack the top 10 in the welterweight category. Many expected him to lose his promotional debut to rookie Mickey Gall. At UFC 203, he made his highly anticipated debut against Mickey Gall. Despite doing better than Mike Jackson, he was dragged down and battered in the first round. The AEW star was defeated in the first round by submission. Punk went on without a win in the UFC before leaving and returning to professional wrestling. Number 1. Wanderlei Silva. Wanderlei Silva debuted in the UFC on October 16, 1998 in a fight against Vitor Belfort at UFC Brazil. It was a duel of future Hall of Famers between the 2 Brazilian prospects, but it wasn't even close. The fight lasted only 44 seconds and ended with Silva being knocked down against the cage by Belfort's punches before being stopped by the referee. Silva went on to win his next UFC battle on May 7, 1999 at UFC 20 when he knocked out Tony Petara with knees, but his debut was unforgettable. We have come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching to the end. If you found it interesting, kindly give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe too. Thanks!